So we are going to talk about the looping statements. Okay. Here, let's say you have a statement, let's say x is equal to y plus z, right? And let's say z equal to 10, for example. So there are two statements you have, and you want to execute these two statements, right? Statement 1 and statement 2. You want to execute repeatedly, right? You execute and you go back and execute again. You keep executing these two statements, right? Based on a condition, right? The condition, based on a condition, if it is true, for example, if the condition is true, then you execute those two statements and evaluate that condition or do something in this during the iteration. And when the condition becomes false, you do not execute that, you skip it and go to the statement next to the loop. This is when the condition is false, right? So that's why it's called looping. You keep looping, right? Keep looping, executing the statements as long as you have the condition is true, right? For example, the example that we have shown in Canvas is you go to a copier, right? You copy a paper or something, and you say you're going to do manually. Okay, you have 10 copies to make. So when you start doing it, right, copy made equal to 0. When you go you're going to start with no copies ever made, and your maximum copies to be made, right, let's say 10. So you want to copy one at a time, right? One at a time. So what you do is while I'll make maybe make it a bit bigger one, right? Bigger one. Let's do this. Let's take a bigger one, right? So here your copies made equal to 0 and maximum copies to be made is 10, right? So you would do this while, right? While copies made, right, is less than max, right? If it's less than max, that is initially it's 0 and I have to make less than 10 copies, right? Maximum 10 copies I have to make. So because this condition is true, right? Because this condition is true, we will say let's say begin, right? This is a generic programming language. The way we implement in each language is totally different. We'll go into that later. And what happens? So you make a copy, right? Make a copy. You make a copy. Say it doesn't matter how you make it. We'll say we make it. And what happens? You made copies made. You will increment the copies made, right? You increment copies made equal to 1. That means now when I make one copy, that means my number of copies is becoming 1, right? Now you go back. When you're done, you go back and done here. You'll do that, right? You do check again. How many copies I made so far? I made 1. So how many I have to make? 10. So this condition is true, right? You go back and make a copy, and then what? Copies made, you're going to make it increment by 1, right? So this has become 2, right? So go back, you go back here and you do this while condition, right? So it is 2 less than 10, right? So condition is true. So you go back and make a copy and you increment that to 3, right? 3 copies. You go back, so 3 is less than 10, so condition is true. So you make copies like this again and again and again and again until you reach, for example, you made 10 copies, right? So you go back here and I check, I made all the 10 copies. Let me see if I need to make it more copies, right? So 10 is less than 10. Is it true? 10 less than true? That is not true. That's false, right? So it becomes false. So you would exit. When the condition is false, you exit and you go back to the statement following the end, right? So that is how looping works. All right, that's how looping works. And is the same true for every condition, right? So sorry. So take this. There are 7 types of loops in Visual Basic, right? We'll go over each. There are different ways of doing it. For example, we'll go over all the things one at a time. So for now, all you got to understand is statements, right? Statements are executed based on a condition. Based on a condition. If the condition is true or false, whatever that is, you would execute the statement, and when you are done, you go back and check the condition again. So this way of repeatedly executing statements based on a condition is called a looping statements. Okay.